The gist, rather than the actual plot of the dream, was a constant refutation of his not loving her. His dream love for her exceeded in emotional tone and spiritual passion and depth anything he had experienced in his surface existence. This love was like an endless wringing of hands, like a blundering of the soul through an infinite maze of hopelessness and remorse. They were, in a sense, amorous dreams, for they were permeated with tenderness, with a longing to sink his head onto her lap and sob away the monstrous past. They brimmed with the awful awareness of her being so young and so helpless. They were purer than his life. What carnal aura there was in them came not from her, but from those with whom he betrayed her. Prickly-chinned Phrynia, pretty Timandra with that boom under her apron. And even so, the sexual scum remained somewhere far above the sunken treasure and was quite unimportant. He would see her being accosted by a misty relative so distant as to be practically featureless. She would quickly hide what she held and extend her arched hand to be kissed. He knew she had just come across a telltale object, a riding boot in his bed, establishing beyond any doubt his unfaithfulness. Sweat beaded her pale, naked forehead, but she had to listen to the prattle of a chance visitor or direct the movements of a workman with a ladder who was nodding his head and looking up as he carried it in his arms to the broken window. One might bear, a strong, merciless dreamer might bear, the knowledge of her grief and pride, but none could bear the sight of her automatic smile as she turned from the agony of the disclosure to the polite trivialities required of her. She would be canceling an illumination or discussing hospital cots with the head nurse, or merely ordering breakfast for two in the sea cave. And through the everyday plainness of the talk, through the play of the charming gestures with which she always accompanied certain ready-made phrases, he, the groaning dreamer, perceived the disarray of her soul and was aware that an odious, undeserved, humiliating disaster had befallen her, and that only obligations of etiquette and her staunch kindness to a guiltless third party gave her the force to smile. As one watched the light on her face, one foresaw it would fade in a moment to be replaced as soon as the visitor left by that impossible little frown the dreamer could never forget. He would help her again to her feet on the same lakeside lawn, with parts of the lake fitting themselves into the spaces between the rising balusters, and presently he and she would be walking side by side along an anonymous alley, and he would feel she was looking at him out of the corner of a faint smile, but when he forced himself to confront that questioning glimmer, she was no longer there. Everything had changed, everybody was happy, and he absolutely had to find her at once to tell her that he adored her. But the large audience before him separated him from the door, and the notes reaching him through a succession of hands said that she was not available, that she was inaugurating a fire, that she had married an American businessman, that she had become a character in a novel, that she was dead. No such qualms disturbed him as he sat now on the terrace of her villa and recounted his lucky escape from the palace. She enjoyed his description of the underground link with the theater and tried to visualize the jolly scramble across the mountains. But the part concerning Gar displeased her, as if, paradoxically, she would have preferred him to have gone through a bit of wholesome Hoff-magandy with the wench. She told him sharply to skip such interludes, and he made her a droll little bow. But when he began to discuss the political situation, two Soviet generals had just been attached to the extremist government as foreign advisors. A familiar vacant expression appeared in her eyes. Now that he was safely out of the country, the entire blue bulk of Zembla, from Embla Point to Emblem Bay, could sink in the sea for all she cared. That he had lost weight was of more concern to her than that he had lost a kingdom. Perfunctorily, she inquired about the crown jewels. He revealed to her their unusual hiding place, and she melted in girlish mirth as she had not done for years and years. Quote, I do have some business matters to discuss, end of quote, he said, quote, and there are papers you have to sign, end of quote. Up in the trellis, a telephone climbed with the roses. One of her former ladies-in-waiting, the languid and elegant Florida Filer, now 40-ish and faded, still wearing pearls in her raven hair and the traditional white mantilla, brought certain documents from Dis's boudoir. Upon hearing the king's mellow voice behind the laurels, Flora recognized it before she could be misled by his excellent disguise. 2 footmen, handsome young strangers of a marked Latin type, appeared with the tea and caught Flora in mid-curtsy. A sudden breeze groped among the glycines. Defiler of flowers, he asked Flora as she turned to go with the Dissa, orchids if she still played the viola. She shook her head several times, not wishing to speak, without addressing him and not daring to do so while the servants might be within earshot. They were alone again. Dissa quickly found the papers he needed. Having finished with that, they talked for a while about nice, trivial things, such as the motion picture based on a Zemblan legend that Odon hoped to make in Paris or Rome. How would he represent, they wondered, the Narstran, a hellish hall where the souls of murderers were tortured under a constant drizzle of drake venom coming down from the foggy vault? By and large, the interview was proceeding in a most satisfactory manner, though her fingers trembled a little when her hand touched the elbow rest of his chair. Careful now. What are your plans? She inquired. Why can't you stay here as long as you want? Please do. I'll be going to Rome soon. You'll have the whole house to yourself. Imagine, you can bed here as many as 40 guests. 40 Arabian thieves. Influence of the huge terracotta vases in the garden. He answered he would be going to America sometime next month and had business in Paris tomorrow. Why America? What would he do there? Teach. Examine literary masterpieces with brilliant and charming young people. A hobby he could now freely indulge. And, of course, I don't know, she mumbled, looking away. I don't know, but perhaps if you'd have nothing against it, I might visit New York. I mean, just for a week or two, and not this year, but the next. He complimented her on her silver-spangled jacket. She persevered. Well? And your hairdo is most becoming. Oh, what does it matter? She wailed. What on earth does anything matter? I must be on my way, he whispered with a smile and got up. Kiss me, she said, and was like a limp, shivering rag doll in his arms for a moment. He walked to the gate. At the turn of the path, he glanced back and saw in the distance her white figure with the listless grace of ineffable grief bending over the garden table, and suddenly a fragile bridge was suspended between waking indifference and dream love. But she moved, and he saw it was not she at all, but only poor Fleur de Filer collecting the documents left among the tea things. See note to line 80. When, in the course of an evening stroll in May or June 1959, I offered Shade all this marvelous material, he looked at me quizzically and said, quote, That's all very well, Charles, but there are just 2 questions. How can you know that all this intimate stuff about your rather appalling king is true? And if true, how can one hope to print such personal things about people who, presumably, are still alive? My dear John, I replied gently and urgently, do not worry about trifles. Once transmuted by you into poetry, the stuff will be true and the people will come alive. A poet's purified truth can cause no pain, no offense. True art is above false honor. Sure, sure. Okay, Google. Sure, sure, said Shade. One can harness words like performing fleas and make them drive other fleas. Oh, sure. And moreover, I continued as we walked down the road right into a vast sunset, as soon as your poem is ready, as soon as the glory of Zembla merges with the glory of your verse, I intend to divulge to you an ultimate truth, an extraordinary secret that will put your mind completely at rest.